You know how today, if you're trying to buy your first property, whether that's a house to live in or your first rental, everything feels impossibly expensive. Interest rates are higher than they have been in years. So it just feels out of reach. Well, back in 2020, I felt the same way. I used my life savings to purchase a property. Actually, this was 2017, and I was petrified. I thought that that house cost way too much, but I made the leap because I knew after studying millionaires and billionaires, people who had made a lot of money in real estate and made money other ways, but used real estate as a vehicle to grow and preserve their wealth, I knew if I didn't get started, I would get left behind. So now I look back on 2020, 2017, and the real estate prices look insanely cheap. So here's the thing, every year, prices go up, generally speaking. The interest rates have been climbing, and there's no sign that they're going to be letting up anytime soon. So I'm making this video in 2025, and I want you to know that if you feel like it's out of reach and impossible to buy a property today, you're probably not going to feel any different 5 years from now. So the important thing is to think creatively, educate yourself, and learn how. Not stop with the I can't, that feeling of it's impossible. Stop telling yourself that you can't and ask yourself, how might it be possible? That's what we're talking about today in this video. I just wanted to sit down with you for 15 minutes and chat about how to get your first rental property. I bought my first property when I was 23 in 2007, but I didn't know anything about investing in real estate, being a landlord, and unfortunately, I sold that property 3 years later. I totally regret it. And then I got back into real estate investing in 2017, so 10 years later. And it has changed my life. And I want you to know that I think if I can do it, anyone can do it, okay? I don't come from a rich family. My parents didn't help me. I don't know anyone, or when I started, I didn't know anyone who was a real estate investor. And so that's why I'm making this, because I want to show you, especially if you can relate to me. I was an English teacher until I started my own business teaching English. And yeah, I never really thought that it would be possible for me to become a real estate investor. It felt like such a foreign thing to call myself that title once I started doing it. I'm stuttering just talking about it. But it's possible, okay? So let's talk about it, because I want you to first of all cultivate a long-term mindset, because picture it's 2030, just 5 years from now, okay? How do you think you're gonna feel thinking back? Okay, we're in 2030, think back to 2025. Do you think you're gonna feel like maybe you should have bought real estate in 2025? Maybe today's prices are gonna look cheap compared to 2030 prices? I think so, because in 2025, today, I look back on prices in 2020 and I think, I wish I could have bought even more real estate because those prices were cheap, okay? So take a long-term mindset and imagine your future self thanking you for getting started as a real estate investor today. It's not going to be easy, and I'm not saying to overpay for properties, but you want to get started, because when you buy property, it is going to become an asset. You can leverage things that you cannot do with just working at a regular job. That's not an asset. A job is not an asset. You can't really leverage your time. You only have so much time in the day. You can build new skills, you can negotiate higher pay, but it's not like real estate where like it's just sitting there. Yeah, you're taking care of it, but it's just different. It's different when the value goes up and you gain that equity basically for doing nothing. It's a different feeling. Okay, so step by step, I promised I would go into these 5 steps for buying your first property, but I had to say all that because I mean, the truth is that real estate rewards people who take action with a long-term mindset. So if you want to be rewarded like tomorrow, overnight, probably not going to happen. I'll tell you, you will have a lot of headaches, especially when you get started. But I do think, if my experience is any indicator, that you will be grateful 5, 10 years from now when you look back at yourself and your decisions, you'll be grateful that you got started. All right, so nowadays, we have a high interest rate, high price market. That is tough. It is difficult to find properties and deals that cash flow. So one thing that I recommend is think about house hacking. So this isn't for everyone, but it's how I got started. Even in 2017, I purchased a house that only had 2 bedrooms, but I lived in the finished basement and I rented out the 2 bedrooms upstairs. And that helped me pay down my mortgage and save money for a down payment on my first rental property. Because as a house hack, I was living in the house, so it wasn't really a straight up rental. It was my primary residence, but I also rented out rooms. So keep that in mind, because that can be very helpful when you're thinking about the cost of a mortgage and saving up for your next home, your next property, because I hope you don't just stop with one. Okay, so the first step is really saving money to get into a property. A down payment is often a huge barrier for a lot of people because they think like, well, I don't have whatever it might be. I don't have 25% of $500,000 just sitting in my bank account, or 25% of 400,000. Let's say that because that's easier to do the math. $100,000. I don't just have $100,000 sitting around. Here's the thing. You don't have to put 25% down, especially if one, it's going to be your primary residence that you house hack. Maybe you rent out rooms, or maybe it's a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex and you rent out the other units, but you have your own private unit. I think this is even better, especially if you like your own privacy and space. But anyway, with that kind of situation, you could put down a lot less for your down payment. It could be 20%, and you don't have the private mortgage insurance fee every month. If you put down less than 20%, it could be as low as 5% that you're putting down. And that is getting to be much more in reach, right? Some loan programs only require 3%. If you can get a VA loan for veterans, that's 0%. So there are different options. And it's important, I was going to say for step 2, to talk to at least 3 different lenders, let them know what you're trying to do, and they should be able to give you some information and education about what loans you might be able to qualify for, how much you'd have to put down as a down payment, and what you're looking at, what you can afford. Okay, another thing to keep in mind is if you're just getting like a straight up rental property, you're not living there, you probably don't have to put 25% down. Usually it could be 20%, but again, you have to talk to the lender. It depends on you and the property and the situation. A third thing to keep in mind for how much money you really need to get a property is creative financing. So nowadays, this is more common. This was not like creative financing. Sellers didn't have to even think about it around 2020. It was really not necessary because like houses were just flying as soon as they were listed. Like it was a different market, let's just say that. But now things are slowing down. They have been for a while, and a lot more sellers are considering creative financing, meaning the seller is the bank. So I did this on a property. I was the seller and I seller financed to a buyer. I've also done this buying other properties, and that means that you just negotiate the terms that work for you and the seller. So of course they have to agree to it, but you could say, hey, I can only put, 5% down. I mean, don't say that like the exact phrase. That doesn't sound very good. You might say like, well, if I could close in 30 days and give you a paycheck every month, or, a mortgage check, a payment every month, what is the lowest price you'd accept, or what's the lowest money down you'd accept? And keep in mind, what is your priority? Like, would you rather have a low down payment, Would you rather, keep the overall price of the property low? I know, of course, you probably want all of the above, like a low monthly interest as well, but think about what's important to you and what might be important to the seller, and you can figure out the terms. So this is a thing. At the end of the day, it's about the people, the situations, and coming up with a solution that's a win-win for both of you. Okay, so I hope that helps figure out that you don't need 25% down. You probably need somewhere closer to 20%, but there are ways and opportunities to purchase a property with even less, especially if you can find the right situation. Next, I'm assuming you're going to need a loan. You probably don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in your bank account. And so you should talk to lenders, make sure that they're experienced with investment property loans, if that's what you're doing, or primary residence loans, if that's what you're doing. Ask them about different rate buy down opportunities, adjustable rate mortgage opportunities. Let them know what you're trying to do and then see how they can help you. And it's good to talk to at least 3 because you're going to get a feeling of how experienced they are and how communicative they are and how much they can help you. So, you are really interviewing them. And of course, they are going to be the ones approving you or not approving you for the loan. But just keep in mind that you're interviewing them because they are going to make money off of your loan. And that's something else to keep in mind when you negotiate the deal, which is step 5, but I'll just mention this now. You can ask the seller to cover some or all of those closing costs. Closing costs meaning what the title company charges you and what the lender charges you, because the lender is going to charge you 1% to 2% of your overall loan. So if you're getting a loan for $400,000, you're looking at up to $8,000 in closing costs. And if you didn't budget for that, that can be a really tough thing coming up with that money before closing. So keep that in mind. There's this phrase, date the rate, but marry the deal, which I don't love, but it is true that rates can change. Make sure that the deal overall makes sense, that it makes sense now. And if rates drop, you can refinance later. That's great. But I would not count on rates dropping. We don't know. They might just continue to go up. So make sure that if you're buying a property, the numbers work for you now, the day that you buy it. Step 3, find the right location. It may or may not be where you're living now. So if you're living in a high cost of living area like San Francisco or New York City, then it probably isn't going to make sense to buy your home or a rental property. You might want to look at a place maybe in the Midwest or a lower cost of living area, especially just outside of downtown areas in the Midwest. You can find properties that cash flow. So I've always enjoyed buying properties in places that I have lived in the past, but I've also lived in a lot of different places over the years. So not everyone has done that. But I would say at minimum, make sure that you're doing your research and go take a trip to the place where you are thinking of investing, because it'll give you a feel and firsthand knowledge. Now, a quick trip is not the same as living there, but I'm just saying it's important to understand the location where you're investing. Check out the job growth and population growth in the area. Check out major employers. The rent to price ratio, and 1% is a good benchmark for cash flowing properties. It was easier to find a few years ago, but you can still find it out there. You just have to look. And finally, landlord-friendly states. You must be aware of states and even cities within states where they have rent control or certain laws that may make being a landlord a little bit more difficult. So I'm not saying not to buy in those areas. I have a couple properties in a city where there's rent control and they're doing great, but you just need to be aware of all the things, that you need to deal with and make sure to follow the rules. Step 4 is you need to run the numbers, analyze a deal. I spent a couple years just running numbers, just practicing analyzing deals before I actually bought my first rental property. Now, I'm not saying you have to do this for 2 years, but learn to run the numbers so you know if a property is going to cash flow or not on the day you buy it. No guessing here. So let's say you find a property for $250,000. It rents for $2,000 a month, and then you're going to have expenses. So one big mistake that people make with their first rental property is underestimating expenses. You're going to have your mortgage, probably includes tax and insurance, but make sure those are escrowed. If not, you want to make sure that you're calculating them in. And then you're going to have maintenance and vacancy, which I generally calculate at 10% of total rents, but that's a general number and it depends on your location, how desirable is the rental, and what condition is the property in? How much maintenance is it going to need? So let's say your expenses are $1,600 a month. That leaves you with $400 a month in profit in this example, and that is solid cash flow. So once you've found a solid deal, don't overthink it. As long as you've done your research, you've run the numbers several times, you're familiar with the location, it's time to make an offer. So of course, make an offer that is in line with your numbers and the current market. So some places are pretty hot markets still. Like houses are going quickly in a certain purchase price bracket. Like more affordable homes are selling really quickly these days. And again, it just depends on the city. Like some cities have been hit hard and the value of homes have gone down significantly, like in Austin, Texas, Miami, Florida. So you might have more room to negotiate in those cities. In other places, not so much. You might even need to end up making an over asking offer. But this is why research is so important. Also, think about negotiating seller concessions like seller paid closing costs that I mentioned earlier. You're probably working with a buyer's agent who hopefully will walk you through all of this, but don't rely on your agent to know everything. You really need to be educated yourself as well, especially as a first-time rental property buyer. So make sure to get an inspection and hopefully it will be thorough and check for any deal breaker items. So for me, I can deal with a lot. I love a good renovation project, but I don't like to deal with fires, foundation issues, or mold. Those are my things that I would just say, sorry, red flag, not pass and go. But they are fixable. It's just a question of money. I mean, everything's fixable, just a question of money. But this is all about running the numbers. And you don't want to get too emotionally attached to a property if the numbers don't work. Okay, so then if you're getting a loan, your lender will order an appraisal to make sure the property is valued at or above your purchase price. You know, they have to protect themselves and make sure they're not lending like 5 times what the property is actually worth. And then you close and you have your rental property. So I know it can feel overwhelming. That's why I wanted to run you through the 5 main steps of getting your rental property. If you have questions, let me know in the comments. And if you've made it this far, you are already ahead of 99% of the other people who are just thinking about buying a rental but never taking action. So don't be that person. If you're ready to start your real estate investor life and create financial freedom for yourself, then drop a let's go in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. And if you'd like to learn more about real estate with me, let me know in the comments. Visit me at gabbywallace.com for more tips and to work with me directly. And thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again next week. Bye for now.